on Lord's Day. What covenant were we talking about on Lord's Day? The Adamic Covenant. I can't hardly hear back over there, so you were going to have to speak up there, Jesse, just a little bit more.
Am I speaking up? Or?
There you go. Now, yeah. The Adamic Covenant is what we were talking about. And can anybody give me just a few thoughts that came from that as it relates to, even though the fact that we don't see the word covenant, why would we call that, why do we still consider a covenant going on there in that passage, even though the word covenant is not used specifically in that passage? Anybody remember why? What are some of the reasons I gave to say that this is why we'd still refer to it as a covenant?
One was the format, the if this, then that kind of a format.
Yep.
If you do this or don't do this, then this.
Yep.
Kind of a format of covenant.
You can eat of all the tree, and you're going to be blessed in that way, really. And He blessed them, be fruitful and multiply. And then, but if you eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, in the day that you eat of it, you're going to surely die. Okay, so yeah, the if, then, and that. So, okay, good. Others, ideas, just quickly, if you've got them, dude. You better write anything. Oops. Anything else down? We went to that passage in Hosea. That chair, huh? It's scary, huh? Went to the passage in Hosea about the fact that the people of Israel at that time had broken the covenant, just like Adam had broken the covenant. Now, we didn't want to hang all of our covenantal thought on that one verse, because there is a little bit of a question as, does Adam in that passage need to be translated Adam or just man? And I personally lean to the fact that it needs to be Adam in that. And so, Adam, covenant, right there it is. There. Okay? And then we looked at the matter of how Adam is really our representative in Romans chapter 5. So, the fall that is about to occur in Genesis 3, Romans 5 tells us that in Adam, we all fell. And so there's covenantal thinking, representative issues, generational issues going on, where God speaks with one person and it has generational effects on generations to come. So those are just a few issues as it relates to the covenant. And then, obviously, what went on with Adam, then you look at Christ on the other side of it. He's the last Adam. And clearly there's covenantal issues with Christ and redemption and so on. And so it would naturally follow that that was it. Now, with that covenantal thought, do you remember what ways God created Adam? Because I gave just some specifics to kind of flesh out where in this covenant and how this covenant and what was all involved in this covenant occurred. So give me some points there. God created Adam
in His image.
In His image, okay, in the image of God.
In a moral sense, a spiritual sense, a mental sense, a relational sense, a creative sense.
Okay, yep, that's good. Wow, you got that one down. God created Adam in His image. And so whatever is going on in this Adamic covenant, we need to understand that it's going on from that perspective. Not from a marred image at that point, but from an image that is created as God designed it at that point, perfectly in God's image to that point. Okay? Secondly, we looked at Adam as a son, not a slave. That's key. Adam is a son, not a slave. He becomes a slave as a result of his disobedience, but at first he was a son. When God made this covenant with him, it was out of sonship, out of a parental relationship there, and thus He blessed him and said, hey, be fruitful and multiply, and then subdue the earth, which leads us to the third one, which Adam was created as a prince, not a pauper. Okay? He was in line of the king, and God is the king of the universe and king of the earth, and Adam was a prince, if you will, in that. And so what you when you look at that, as it relates to the law that God had established through this Adamic covenant, that puts a whole different understanding on it. If he is not a son but a slave, then it's obedience is required, and then I'm going to bless you if you obey, kind of a thing. Whereas if he's a son, hey, you've already got it. Here's some guidelines. I'm going to give you some standards to maintain this. You're not earning anything. You already have it. And I think that's key. Because that won't be the case in just a few days after, when the fall occurs. He loses it all, and so then that changes the whole perspective. Okay, next one.
We had on that one.
Go ahead.
Becky and I had a question. We wrote it down different. You said the idyllic condition. He was Prince, and you says he was created happy and holy. Mm-hmm. And I said Holy, and she said Who. So which we were wondering which it was. Is he whole?
Yeah, or holy. I would have to say both. I would say both. There was no deficiencies in his system at that time.
Writing our notes and
yeah, that's a good point, though.
She goes, "Hey, you spelled it."
You spelled it differently. Yeah, that's a good point, though. Yeah, that's right. I hadn't thought about it in that way. And that is key, because if there was a deficiency or a lack thereof or something that didn't meet perfection at that time as they had it, then when the law comes out, it changes the whole slant and feel of that Adamic covenant. And then it begins it down the trail of a works salvation. And justification has never been by works. Never. It has never been by the law. Okay? And so that's the emphasis. That's what's key. And unfortunately, there's a little bit of a misunderstanding when people come to these covenants. They look at it and say, "Well, look, yeah, that they started in works, and it has been called the covenant of works." But when you dive into what they mean by all of that and really understand it, as we've been talking about it, it's not works at all.
They gave him a choice.
They gave him, he had that moral ability, which leads us to that point. Okay, he had moral ability. All right, and he had the capability at that point to choose. God gave him the ability to choose good from evil. Right? Here's the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Adam saw that, and you can eat it. When you do, you're going to die. In a spiritual sense, and then ultimately physically. If you don't, you eat of the tree of life, there's going to be everlasting, you're going to have life. And there's a question mark as to relates to all that, the tree of life and what kind of life and all of those kinds of things. And what if Adam hadn't eaten the fruit and Eve did, and how, all those speculative things that we are not told on, so we probably ought not go down the trails too far.
I just heard a message on headship and fatherhood and things like that I was listening to from Doug Wilson, and he said a phrase that made me think of what you're talking about. He said, Adam, that a husband's job is to provide and protect, right, for your family, for your wife, and that is ultimately what Adam's sin was. Failed. He did not protect his wife.
Yeah.
It was the very first thing he did.
Yeah. He was not acting as the prophet, priest, or king
of his home. Yeah.
Of his home. That's right. Protecting, providing, directing. Yep.
That was interesting. Because you always get, it was her fault first and whatever. But
no, it lays on his shoulders, which is a sobering thing, because what goes on in our home then is really a lesson. What goes on in our home is not laid at the wife's feet. It's laid at the dad, the head of the home, at his feet. Okay, so then, what was another one that we gave? Adam was created with moral ability. Adam was created in an idyllic situation, conditions. Adam was created in the image of God. And there's another one further down the line that we talked about as it relates to what I'm really going to talk about now.
Under the law.
Okay?
Upright in heart.
He was upright in heart. Okay? Yeah, that's the moral ability issue. Yep. Okay? But yet, as Ecclesiastes says, man has sought out many evil devices, or schemes, if you will. So he took that ability and moved it in a wrong direction. Okay, another one. As it relates to I can't remember. I think
created under law.
Under law, created under law. Okay, created under law. And that was the one that I'm going to talk about the most. I'm going to unpack a little bit tonight. Created under law. How many of you have ever considered the law coming after the fall? Or what do we think of? Maybe let's back up. What do we think about when we think about the law? What is the law in our minds?
Ten Commandments given to Moses.
Okay.
Mount Sinai, that's what I was thinking.
Okay, 10 Commandments given to Moses. Okay? Everybody pretty much agree on that? When we think of law, instantly, that's what we think about. At Bible College, Frontier, the word law was used all over the place. And I could never figure out for the longest time, I think for 6 or 7 months in the first year, you probably didn't have that problem, but I did. We were freshmen, Joe and I at the same time, so she was more adept at these things than I did. What is the law? What is the law? What is the law? What does that refer to? And I just couldn't figure it out. Finally, okay, summed up, 10 Commandments. Okay? There's 3 different types of law that we would see in Scripture, basically. Okay? So here's where we get to start using our paper. This is going to be different for me to do this. So, but by request, this is what I'm doing. All right. So I'm hoping that it will help. By request.
Who requested it?
I'm not saying. I will not incriminate anyone. Okay. Three types of law. Okay. Can somebody give me one type of law? Moral law, i.e., what would we always call, what do we call the moral law? The 10 Commandments, okay, yep. So we've got moral law here. All right, what's another one?
Ceremonial.
Ceremonial law, okay. And my spelling, I do not take any kind of, what's my word? Responsibility for my spelling. Okay. Ceremonial law. Can you see that?
Light's glaring on it.
Is the light glaring on it?
That's all right. We can.
Okay, because
There. No, I don't know if
everybody else can see that?
Yeah, it's better.
Okay. Ceremonial law. That gets me a little closer to you two. All right. What do we talk about when we talk about ceremonial law? What are we referring to? Does anybody know?
Leviticus.
Okay. Leviticus, the sacrifices of the Old Testament. Yeah, spiritual kind of issues, all those in that kind of way. Okay. What's the third kind of law that we would see basically in the Scripture? I realize there's natural law, general law, all of those, but we're not talking about those tonight. What's that? Civil. Okay. So we have civil law. Does that make sense? All right. Now, with that, let me read something for you from the London Baptist Confession. Okay? And if you don't have it, again, we encourage you to get it. God gave to Adam a law of universal obedience written in his heart, and a particular precept of not eating the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, by which he bound him and all his posterity to personal, entire, exact, and perpetual obedience. Okay? The same law was first written in the hearts of man, continued to be the perfect rule of righteousness after the fall, and was delivered by God upon Mount Sinai. Beside this law, commonly called moral law, God was pleased to give to the people of Israel ceremonial laws containing several typical ordinances, partly of worship and so on, and prefiguring of Christ. And then you have the civil law. All right. So they go on and they explain some of those things a little bit further. So if you want to look at that on your own. Now, what we would understand is that ceremonial and civil law pretty much have been abolished, as the confession will say, done away with. But the moral law is that what they have referred to as a perpetual law. Now, how is that the case? And I want to show this to you tonight. Okay?